Ciao ragazzi, this is Katie Portanova, and you're listening to Florence and Me. I'm a lover of stories and all things Italian, and I'm going to bring you all that in this podcast. My intention is to inspire you to step out of your comfort zone and explore life and travel the world. Join me as I tell you my story and many others about Italy and my love, Florence. Andiamo! Hello again. Ciao. I'm back. It is episode 8, and 8 is a very interesting number. I have a history with the number 8. And those of you that know numerology and maybe are interested in numbers and what they mean, you might already know where I'm going with this, but I'm going to tell you a story about the number 8. So, the first time I started thinking a lot about the number 8 was a certain excursion I had with my dear friend Pasquale. We took his brother's car one afternoon and we drove up to Santa Brigida, which is probably the northern Tuscany, like about maybe 30-40 minutes from Florence. And there was a sagra, I believe, that was going on. I forget exactly why we went up there, but he asked me. My friend Pasquale is another episode, but I'll give you just a little synopsis of him. He is my little amazing friend who I would call my guru, but he would not want me to call him that. He's very magical. If you have any friends in your life that make you feel like just seen and heard, this is the type of friend that Pasquale is to me. So we went up to Santa Brigida. The story of this, I'll give you a short story of this, but we stopped along the way to stop and look at fruit. Pasquale is one of the land of the terra, and he loves nature, loves herbs, loves all types of things that come out of the earth. And on this one trip, I'm going to tell you the full story on another episode because it's very interesting. But on this one trip, we were in a part of Santa Brigida that was, it's a very small town, but we went off the beaten path as we do. And we went towards a path that led up to a monastery on top of a hill. So you could see it from the below. But as we were walking up to this hill, I saw on a tree in black the number 8. I took a picture of it, and then we began our discussion of the number 8. That it means infinity, it can mean creation, mean manifesting. I took this really to heart because at that time, and this was 2010, I was really uncertain about where I was going while living in Italy and teaching English. Like, what am I doing? My purpose, all this stuff. So when I saw that number 8 and me and Pasquale had a really deep conversation about what that means, it really gave me hope for what was to come. And another beautiful thing that happened that night, we'll talk about it further as I talk about this in another episode because it's a great story. We went to the Sagra, we had something to eat, and then we came out away from the lights, even though that city is very small. And we laid down on the grass and we looked up and there were shooting stars just all over the place. And I was like a little kid, a little girl, freaking out, and I felt my grandfather next to me. And he was very, very special to me. And he said, You're going to be okay. You're doing the right thing. And that's when I knew Pasquale was like really magical because I hadn't felt that close to my grandfather who had passed in 2002 since 2007, which that's another story. But that was very special. So fast track to where I was living at the time, and I began to look at numbers differently after this. And I was living on a street called Via Lambruschini di 19, which is 19. And 19, 9 minus 1 is 8. Okay, so from there, I lived there with my friend Marco. That was the first apartment I had. And then from there, I went and lived with Marco again. Marco bought a house not too far from where we were, a couple streets over on Via Vanucci in Statuto. And that was numero 4. 4 plus 4, 8. So I'm like, okay, this is freaking me out. I remember journaling about this. I remember thinking hardcore about this. And then I go and live with Stefano, which I'm going to tell you that story shortly. And his address was Via delle Sciabbie, 17. 7 plus 1, 8. Oh, I was like, what? This is crazy. So, anyway, so that's the number 8. So this is how it started with Via Lambruschini di 19, and then moved up into those other addresses. And this is what's really cool. So, okay. Before I met Stefano, I was on a few dating websites. Okay. In 2011, dating websites were still a thing. There is Match.it for Italy. And that's where I started meeting some interesting gentlemen. I met a lot of different guys. Not only from this website, but I met through friends and stuff too. But I started putting my toe in the water, let's say, and started meeting some really interesting people. I've said that 5 times. Okay. When I connected with Stefano the first time, it was through Skype. Now we're in 2021. Skype, I have not opened in years. So I don't even know if Skype still exists. But Skype was the type of WhatsApp of the day. And this is how we started communicating. Our first date was interesting. We were talking for hours on Skype, and we ended up meeting at 11 p.m. on, I don't remember if it was a weeknight or weekend, I don't remember. And since Stefano was talking to me through dinner time, he had not eaten dinner. So he took me to a food truck near his house and scarfed down a cheeseburger in front of me because I had already eaten. So I'm like, I'm not going to eat again. It's 11 o'clock. So we did that. And then we went to get a drink. I think this was a weekend night. Yeah. And we went to get a drink at this place called Kitsch on Viale. Oh, I can't remember. It's a big Viale. Anyway, it's in Piazza Beccaria. I know where the piazza is. And we went there, and ladies, when you remember your first date with the one that you're with, it's just an interesting turn of events. Stefano was very confident. I mean, he still is confident to this day, but he's very confident in who he was and where he came from and all that stuff. On this date, he told me about his mother had passed away from cancer back in 99. So he has his dad still, and his dad remarried, and he's talked about his sister. And the other thing that I always like to joke with him about is that he boasted on how much of a amazing dancer he is. Okay. And I know when I looked at him and I'm like, oh, that's so cool. And he told me that he won a dance contest at a local dance club in Florence. I'm like, oh, interesting. And I'll have to say, Stefano is a very good dancer. He really is. Really, like everybody in my family, I think he's a really good dancer. So when he said that, I'm just like, oh my God, he's just like tooting his own horn, whatever, yeah. So that he said that, and that was interesting. I remember sitting at the bar, and there was a gentleman next to me, and he actually just like touched my ass while I was talking to Stefano, and I said, can we move? Because he's touching my ass. And Stefano was like, oh my God, yes. And he probably said something else, but like then we went and sat at a table. So I thought that was very chivalrous, very gentlemanly to take me away from danger. And yeah, the conversation was very, small talk, getting to know each other. He wanted to know why I was there in Italy, how I got there. And he didn't speak any English. So he was impressed by my Italian from what I remember. And the last thing that I always remember of our first date is we were walking across the street where we parked the car, this huge viale, which is like 6 lanes, 7 lanes. I don't know, it's huge. And he put his hand on the small of my back to kind of guide me across. And I'm like, oh, I love that. Ladies, shout out to all the ladies that like when men do that. And I was smitten. Yeah, I would be honest, I was smitten. I don't remember exactly when we saw each other again, but it probably was within the next weekend. We were kind of slowly starting to get to know each other, and he still had a lot of walls up, I could tell. I didn't try to break them down at all. I wanted it to be very natural. And every time I saw him, and this is some advice to you ladies out there, if you're still trying to find somebody or trying, connect with new people, and with the pandemic, it was really hard for people that date. But I always, with every guy I dated in Italy, and there were a lot, I always said to myself, after the date, he walked into the door, and, if he kissed me or not, I don't care. And like, I get into my room, I get into my apartment, and I always thought, okay, if this was the last time I see this man, I'm going to think of him fondly. I'm going to not be upset about what happened, and if it didn't happen, if I never hear from him again, okay. But I enjoyed myself. I always wanted to have that feeling of, yes, I enjoyed myself. It was mutual. We enjoyed each other, or we didn't enjoy each other, and that's okay. And that really helped me with just understanding if these guys were what I wanted in a man and in a partner, in a husband. So that's what I did, and it helped, as I will tell you this next story as we move on. So this was, we met initially in June. In June of 2011, the exact date I have written down because I have so many anniversaries with my love. But the anniversary that I always tell him he have to always remember is our first official date, which is what I consider when he kissed me for the first time. And that was on San Giovanni. That was the 24th of June, 24. And San Giovanni is the patron saint of Florence. And there's a huge fireworks spectacular. Everyone's in the piazzas. Everyone there is packed with people. Street food. We're all just, drinking on the street. It's just very summer-like, very fun, very festive. It's great. And it's hot also because Florence was hot in June. So he had a motorcycle, and that was very sexy for you ladies that like motorcycles. He had a motorcycle, so he asked me if I was comfortable on the motorcycle. I'm like, well, I've never been on one, so go slow. And he's just like, well, you just have to hold on. I'm like, okay. So he had a helmet for me, and we drove to where we ended up near Santa Croce, Piazza Santa Croce, and then we had like a pizza, and we watched the fireworks. We weren't holding hands at all at this time, but there was chemistry, there was energy, there was electricity. I could feel it. I remember I was supposed to meet up with some friends that night, but I ended up not doing that because I was with him and I didn't know where it was going. And I kind of wanted to leave it up to him and what we were going to do and what I wanted to do and stuff. So the fireworks went on for a while. Okay, so those of you that obviously everyone's seen fireworks, if you're with a loved one or a new guy or whatever, you're looking up so much and you're just waiting to see if like he's going to make a move or not. Oh my God, I don't know. Blah, blah, blah. And so the fireworks were almost over, and I think they were I feel like they were like 45 minutes. I don't know. They were long. And we're just looking up, and because we had the motorcycle, we could get around traffic really well. And so Stefano said to me, he's like, hey, do you want to go? So we can get out of, the traffic. And I'm like, okay. And I remember him grabbing my hand, and I just felt this like jolt and kind of moving me through the crowd. And then out of nowhere, he just grabs me and kisses me. I'm like, oh, this is it? And in my head, I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Like, I was elated. And we spent the rest of the night at a pub away from all the crowds, talking and drinking, and just, it was amazing. Kissing, it was fun. And leaving that night, and because he was driving, he wasn't a big drinker, so I was like drinking way too much, I think, of course. He leans over to me and he's like, okay, what do you want to do tomorrow? And I said, what? Like, I didn't know what was going to happen. I thought maybe this might be just it. I don't know. I was trying not to get my hopes up. And when he leaned in and said that, I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, tomorrow's Saturday. Because I think, San Giovanni was on a Friday that year, and it was a Saturday. And he's like, where do you want to go? Do you want to go to the seaside? I'm like, yeah. And at this time, I had been from the episode before when I talked about my Fiorentini friends, they would tell me all the time that San Vincenzo is such a beautiful place, beautiful beach. You got to go there. And I had never been. So I said, that's what came to my mind. I'm like, San Vincenzo. He's like, okay, I'm going to pick you up at 9 tomorrow, and we're going to go to San Vincenzo for the day. I'm like, okay. What? Are you kidding? I was like, oh my God. So he drove me home, kissed me goodnight, took me to walk me to the door. It was the most romantic first date I've ever had. Ever. And I'll never forget that. And so that was the end of June. And we're moving through like July. Coming up was a wedding of his best friend, who's now my best friends as well, Alessandro and Adriana. They were getting married that July, and he would tell me about it, but he didn't invite me to it. He went by himself, which is fine because, again, we just met. There was a point, I believe this was in July. This is when it happened. And I want to tell this story because I want women out there to know that men have a lot of, things that they go through from past relationships that they don't know how to move through. So what happened was it was at the end of a night we were together, we were hanging out, we went out to dinner and he was driving me home. And before he drove me home, I think we were getting in the car and I just said, oh, it would be really nice to watch the sunset with you. Now, those of you that probably were like, what are you doing, Katie? You just met him. It's like not even a month in and you're saying this. I always thought the man that I was going to be with, I want to be completely honest with. And whatever comes up in my mind, in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm going to say how I feel because then I'm not hiding myself and who I am to this other person. So anyway, I said that and all of a sudden the energy between us changed. And we get in the car and I kind of just looked over to him. I'm like, are you okay? And he started rambling. Now, Italians normally ramble when they're angry or upset, and you can't really stop them because they have so much emotion and so much, things that come up. And Stefano's one of those people that he talks his feelings out and he talks out loud to himself, maybe to explain things to himself. I didn't know this. So I'm looking at him going, you are crazy. What's going on? I was also heartbroken. So what he was doing was saying like, I don't know why you're asking me this. And I'm like, asking you what? I don't know why you're asking me to go watch the sunset. I'm like, okay, well, I'm just asking because I like being around you. And then, the floodgates open and he says, well, you have a house, I have a house. I have a car, you have a bike. You have a job, I have a job. And he just like was rambling. I'm like, I had tears in my eyes because I was really upset because I'm like, wait a minute, am I with another weirdo? Because I had dated a few guys that kind of like, I said something that triggered them to deny me. And I was like, that's not me. That's not me. They're upset about something else. And at the time, so what happened, we get to my house, he's still kind of rambling and he just kind of says like, okay, get out. And like, he was kind of abrupt and a little rude, but I had tears in my eyes. So I think he could tell that I was upset. So he wasn't that rude, but I think he was very much triggered. And I found out later why. So I get out of the car, I get to the door, he speeds away and I'm like, okay. And I kind of collected myself and I'm like, okay, Katie, that's not you. There's something else that happened to him that I don't know about. And if he doesn't want to tell me, fine. If I never, and I said this thing to myself again, if I never see him again, I will think of him fondly. I will enjoy and be happy about the time we spent together, but I'm not going to beat myself up for this because that's not me. That all that in the car was not me. And being fragile and being obviously never in a really secure relationship ever in my life, I was very, very, walking on eggshells, like really trying to be easy on myself. I do remember calling my mom in the middle of the night, well, not middle of the night for her, but in the middle of the night for me, and explaining my feelings and stuff and kind of getting them all out. But it was okay. Like I was strong enough to know, okay, this is not me. I did nothing wrong. I just said how I felt. So a week goes by. I did not hear from him at all. I was with my friend Lexi in Rinascente, which is kind of like a Macy's in Florence, right in Piazza Repubblica. And we were walking around the store, kind of just browsing. And I looked at Lexi and I'm like, I I don't know what I should do. Like, if I should do anything, I don't. And I explained the whole story to her, and she's like, why don't you just text him and just say, how are you? And just open the conversation. And this was a Friday. I remember doing this. And I'm like, okay. I mean, it doesn't hurt. I didn't write him at all. I didn't do anything weird on Facebook or anything like that. Like, so I wrote him, and literally, guys, 2 seconds later, he writes me back, vuoi mangiare fuori con me stasera? Do you want to eat out tonight? Do you want to go out tonight? I'm like, oh my God, yeah. We ended up not talking about that incident until months later. What happened is he had a really bad relationship before me. I won't get into details, but he had just a really clingy woman in his life, and he was afraid that that's what I wanted, and that's what I was doing, and turned out I wasn't. So, our relationship started very, very gingerly, very slowly. I didn't try to be too available, and I don't think he did either. But whenever we said we were available, it was like immediate. We were together. We went out to dinner. We went to an aperitivo. We went to watch a movie or whatever we did. I remember going back home in 2010 for the month of August, because in Italy, everything shuts down in August, and my school was shut down. So I was like, what am I doing? Might as well go home. So I went home, and I remember calling him from home, from Skype. And he was enthralled. Like, he was like, how are you doing this? He was not really tech savvy. So I think he was very touched that I called him and that I was thinking about him. And he ended up picking me up at the airport when I came back in at the end of August, September. And this is when we started kind of getting a little more serious. I wasn't really staying at Marco's anymore. At the time, my friend Simone, he had sold his house, and he moved in with us for a while until he found a new place. So he was always joking with me, going, Katie, you're never here. You might as well just move in with him. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I love living with two guys. It's awesome. And Simone, yes, is my friend Simone from Joshua Tree. This is the same guy. So if you were wondering, so the fall goes by, we become closer and closer, and Marco tells me towards the end of closer to December, tells me that he's going to do some renovations on the apartment, on his house. And I said, okay. I'm like, well, I'm going home for Christmas, so I guess I don't know what I'm going to do. I got to find a place when I come back. And Stefano's like, well, you can live with me. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. And I said that to him. I'm like, I'm not sure. I don't know if that's right. I'm not really sure. And nothing against him, but I was like, my independent self was like, hell fucking no, Katie, you're going to lose your independence. Got to stay with your apartment. Maybe Kelly will let you live. I was trying to think of anybody that will let me live with them for a little bit, because I don't think the work was done until like February or March of the next year. So, so Stefano offered to move my stuff to his house. And now I can't remember specifically when this all happened, but I think it was after I came back from Christmas. So this was 2012. And I remember him just saying, like, why don't you just live with me? And I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that. And nothing against him. Like, I really did enjoy living with him. But again, when you move into somebody else's house, it becomes, I didn't feel like it was my house. So I acted like the guest. And then I acted like I started acting like the housewife, and like cleaning and doing the laundry and and that's not me. Like, of course I do that now, but like, it wasn't me at the time. So I thought I was like getting put into this role. And, Italian women are kind of put into that role at a young age too. So I know it's like embedded in the culture, but like, I just didn't want to do that. So I had to sit down with him and say, you know, I do care about you, and I don't remember when we said we loved each other, to be honest. It had to have been around this time. I'm not really sure. But I did care about you and I loved you, and but I didn't know if this was the right thing to do. And so the day came when I had moved most of my stuff out, and I left, you know, the furniture that Marco had bought me and stuff like that. And and Marco wasn't there, but I remember getting the last bit of my stuff with tears in my eyes. I was like, I don't know if we should do this. And I was looking at Stefano. I'm like, I don't know if we should do this. And he's like, what's wrong with you? And he's like, oh, it's fine. Everything's fine. I'm like, yeah, but what if we have a fight? And I'm like, doing all these, like, saying all these scenarios that might happen, like, that will break us up. And then where the fuck am I going to live? Where am I going to go? Like, Marco's going to find a new roommate, and it's going to be different. And I won't be able to move back in. And this is my safety net. And he's like, come on, don't worry about it. Everything's fine. We love each other. We care about each other. I want you to be with me. I want you to stay with me. I want you to live with me. I'm like, and he's just professing his love to me, and I'm still crying. And I'm like, I don't know. And so I end up, you know, closing the door of Marco's apartment, Marco's house. And I had the keys in my hand. And so Stefano was like, what does Marco say to do with the keys? And he's like, well, he said to put them in the mailbox. And the mailbox in Italy, usually the mailboxes are right at the front door in the condominiums. And so it was right there. And he's like, okay, put them in there. And I'm like, no, 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 I don't want to. And I'm crying. My eyes are watering. I'm just like really, really scared, because I've never done this. I've never lived with anybody that I really cared about. I've lived with friends. I lived with, you know, guy friends and stuff like that, but like never like this. And it was a big step for me, and I didn't know if I was ready. So he grabs the keys from me. He's like, okay, I'll put them in. And I'm like, okay. That was okay. And he saw me kind of like a little smile, and he's like, but why are you smiling? What's going on? I'm like, well, I have the mailbox key right here. And he's like, give me the mailbox key. I'm like, no. And so he took it and he put it in there, and that's how I became his roommate. And we became more serious. And after that, it kind of felt, it was always shaky. There were certain things that happened that I was worried and nervous, and I don't know, and trying to think of a backup plan. Like, what's my plan B if this doesn't work out? Where do I go? Who do I live with? And, but the trust, I had to trust that my intuition was right, because then I moved into Via della Sciabbia, 17. 7 plus 1 is 8. So 8 was in all of my addresses, meaning infinity, meaning manifesting, creation. Everything's moving in this synchronicity type way. And I feel like I was following the right path. And I believe wholeheartedly that I did. And, in March of that year, 2012, he took me to Marsalam in Egypt. Now, I had never thought I would be going to Egypt ever. But Egypt, for them, in Italians, it's like they're Caribbean, and they get really good deals. So we got a pretty good deal. We flew from Bologna. It was a very memorable experience. But again, we kept getting closer and closer, and you know, he would do just random things, really sweet things, like buying me flowers. And, you know, there was just a lot of really eye-openers that I'm like, oh my God, I can do this. I can have a relationship with a man, and I can communicate with him, and it's going to be okay. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be like Sex in the City. Like, you know, so, I made a point too, as we got closer, to always tell him I would say, Stefano, I'm like, you need to tell me when I'm doing something that you don't like, or you're upset with me about something, or if I should be free to tell you when I'm upset with you. And we just got to keep communicating, because if we don't, it's not going to work. I want you to tell me everything, how you're feeling, what you're feeling about me, if things change. Like, we made a pact, and it worked, because to this day we do. We communicate really well. Social media does not help that sometimes, but we've worked through that, but we do have a lot of good connection conversations together to this day. And yeah, I mean, it was a beautiful way to get to know somebody. There were a few things that I remember when we were first dating that I had said to some other guys, and for him, it didn't really matter. Like, he kind of was like, I'll tell you this one thing that I thought this was very interesting, because I had never said this to anybody else besides this one group of people. So you remember the Florentine friends I had, and there were, God, for the life of me, I only remember two of their names, Johnny, Alessandro, and Alessandro's the one that I was like kind of like in love with. Like, I really was like smitten with him, and he was my student. And then his friend, I think his name was Jacopo. I can't remember. Anyway, we were all out. It was the three of us. And you people that know me, I always, it's my jam to hang out with a bunch of guys. And when they're my cool guy friends, and they were my cool guy friends at the time, we had so much fun. So we were out in aperitivo, and there were these Africans walking around, and what they do is they sell these like flowers, and they sell roses, and they sell these little knick-knack things to tourists and stuff. But they usually go around to like the aperitivis and the restaurants, and they try to sell roses, so they get, that's their income. So there was a guy that came around. He was this African boy, and I said to him, he had a red rose, and I said, well, do you have a blue rose? And he's like, no, why would I have a blue rose? I'm like, well, I kind of want a blue rose. And I was just kind of playing with him. And the three guys looked at me like going, why would you ask that? Like, why not? I love blue. Give me a blue rose, just spray paint it. I don't know. So that happened. And then when me and Stefano were courting, we were at a different aperitivo at a different part of town. And Stefano said something, and I don't know what the story was exactly, but he said something like, God, I would just love a blue rose. And I'm like, what? And I like grabbed him and I kissed him. I'm like, oh my God. And I told him the story. And I forget exactly what we were talking about. And it might just be like, we were talking about roses because those guys came in and stuff like that. And he just said, oh God, I would kill for a blue rose. I'm like, oh, what? Like, connection. Oh my God. So, yeah. So that's the story of me meeting him and, a few months later. The last story I'll tell you, and this is before I met Stefano. I was sitting, I might have told you this story. I'm going to tell it again. Who cares? I don't edit this, so it doesn't matter. I don't edit these. So I was sitting at the banks of the Arno in Cascine, Parco della Cascine, with Laura, my friend Laura. Laura, I miss you. I love you. She still lives in Florence with her beautiful babies and her beautiful husband. And this is before we were with anybody. And I believe we did this in 2009, probably when I first got there. And we were sitting on the banks there. And I remember we were talking about like boyfriends and like finding the one and whatever. And she was very distraught. I believe she was distraught on one of the guys that she was dating at the time. And like, it wasn't working out. Things were going well. And I learned from my first life coach, God rest her soul. She passed last year, and it's really sad. Anyway, she taught me this contrast clarity exercise. So what I did is in the contrast column, I wrote what I don't want in a man or don't want in a partner. And then in the clarity, like to define and affirm like what I want in a partner. Now, I do have that somewhere and I find it every once in a while. I have so many journals and so many notebooks and oh my God, I can't always keep track. So I wrote down all these things and I remember me and Laura doing that, and Laura doesn't remember. I don't even know if she remembered where she put it. She probably does. No, I think she remembers it. But anyway, I remembered, and after I met Stefano, I went back to that notebook because I still had it. I still have it now. And all the things that I put in the what I want is exactly what Stefano is. So it just goes to show you, like, the universe is listening. It is attracting what you want to attract when you tell it what you want. There it be, a partner, a job, a baby, I don't know, whatever it is, like you got to put it out there. That is all up to you. So that is the story of a couple different stories of how I met Stefano and the number 8 and all that stuff. And I think the whole experience of me meeting him and how it all went down just goes back to trust, because I trusted in myself. I didn't listen to anybody else. I listened to my heart. I did what felt right. I spoke my truth, and I just kept leaning in to being uncomfortable, because moving in with him was very uncomfortable. Telling him how I wanted to see the sunset with him was uncomfortable, but I did it. And he is still my partner 10 years later. And I love him so much. Ti amo, amore mio. He won't listen to this because it's English. It's okay. But I love him anyway. But thank you for listening. And if you're struggling with any of these types of issues of trusting and, leaning into that, just do it. Do it and reach out to me if you have any thoughts or questions or feedback. I love hearing from people that enjoy listening. I've gotten a few contacts and people telling me that they enjoy hearing my stories, even if they're, in my words, very off on tangent and going all over the place. But that's just how I talk, and I'm embracing who I am, and I love who I am. The fact that, I've had all these amazing adventures to tell you these amazing stories, because there's so much more to come. I have so many more that I'd like to put out into the world and inspire you to step out of your comfort zone and just try something new and be you. Oh, overall, just be you above it all. Because that's what's the most important thing, is to be yourself and do what feels right. Listen to your heart. I'm just going to keep repeating exactly what I just said. I'm going to end this episode right now. Have a lovely day. Ci si vede. Ciao, ciao. A dopo. I am beyond grateful for you listening to my podcast right now. I am so excited to share my journey of living abroad and all my stories of Florence and Italy and all the places in between that I've visited. If this has reached you in any way and you would like to continue, please subscribe now. Also, go check out my website, trulyitaly.tours, for all my travel experiences. Ci si vede. Ciao.